Let's get people to come in. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Just letting people to come in for a few seconds and then we'll get started. Our speakers are ready. It's going to be exciting. In the meantime, if you want to tell us where you're calling in from, where you're joining us from, feel free to mention in the chat. Sunny Miami. I'm from Orange County, California. Not as sunny as I want to, Mark. Okay, so we're at time. Welcome everybody to RevGenius and Outplay webinar. Today we have amazing topic, very exciting and great speakers. My name is Christina. I'm from RevGenius. Just wanted to welcome you all and mention a couple of housekeeping rules. Basically, enjoy. Don't hesitate to ask questions. You have a Q&A section in your Zoom panel, so please use that to ask the questions to our speakers. If you prefer, you can also put it in the chat. I'll help monitor the chat as the webinar goes. Basically, enjoy, engage, and have an awesome time. I'm going to hand it over to Sandeep, our moderator from Outplay.
Thank you, RevGenius, and thank you, Christina, for that welcome, and welcome all of you who've joined us today. Let me just quickly share my screen as we do this. I'm hoping most of you can see my screen. So just set context for everyone, right? So the topic of discussion today is going to be how do we scale outbound campaigns faster? And to discuss this, we have a wonderful set of panelists who've joined us today. I'd like to welcome Gavin MacDonald, who's the head of sales for Uscreen. Hi, Gavin. Welcome to this,
this
webinar. Awesome.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. It's going to be a fun topic.
Awesome, awesome. And also welcome Marc Belgrave, who's Director of Community Engagement at RevPartners. Hey, Marc.
Hey, Sandeep. I'm super stoked to be here. Really enjoyed our kind of pre-webinar conversation where the conclusion is, if you want more, sell more. I think that's Gavin.
That's Gavin there. You're awesome. Want more, sell more, and outbound has a big role to play in all of that. And we'll talk about how you can actually do that, and that's why we're all here. And like Christina mentioned earlier on as well, don't hesitate, drop in your questions just for whatever it's worth. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll actually answer them, but feel free to just drop in those questions as we keep discussing stuff. If there is something that we're not covering or not talking about, feel free to drop it in. We'll try to cover it up in the time that we have here. If not, we'll get back to you with some of those responses. Great, so with that, we'll get started. And the first question, maybe before we get started as well, just to set things into a little bit of context, right? So today we're in a world where there's so many different sales motions going on. Of course, outbound is one, and all of us know outbound as being one of the most traditional forms of selling. The origins of sales probably come in from outbound more than anything else. You've got outbound, you of course have inbound, has a motion. Now we got people talking about product-led growth as being another motion that's happening on the side. I think, and this question of course goes to both of you. We'll start with Gavin, of course. Here, what is the relevancy of outbound today? In today's world, we know everyone's outbounding, we know all of that's happening, but how important is outbounding still today? And if you can just share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, and let me also preface this by saying I lead the sales team of a product-led growth organization, okay? And I'm still here talking about the importance of outbound, all right? So there we go. We'll do the golf clap all around. Thanks, Mark. Look, you know, terms like product-led growth or inbound-led or, you know, things like PQL, they're all important drivers. They're important things to add to the ecosystem. But you look at any great organization, there's always an outbound engine that helps power scalability and growth, all right? So things coming in, whether it's through PLG or maybe a system of sales assistants and stuff like that, and doing a lot more order taking, that does have caps on it. And every organization that I've been a part of, every organization that I've led, the true secret to scaling quickly and effectively is to get after it, right? If you've identified your ICPs, you've identified your targets through these great different methodologies, then there is a roadmap out there for you to go get more, all right? That's a combination of a lot of different things, and I'm excited to start, talking about different methodologies. I'll also start to hear what Marc has to say about some of these, but reaching out to customers is never not going to be a key part of growth, especially when it comes to sales. In our pre-call, we talked about if you want more, sell more. I'm probably going to create a t-shirt and start selling it. Then I'll drop the link for everybody out there. But the best way to start selling more is to be proactive. All right. Don't wait for things to always come to you. Scale it out and go get it.
Awesome. Marc, if you want to add to that as well, and also maybe draw in the context of the fact that, see, Outbound has taken a bit of slack as well, right? A lot of people say Outbound is you're making too many calls or you're spamming, and traditionally it's been a very spray and pray approach. Things have changed now. We're no more doing, I'm hoping when most of us are not doing that anymore, but how is it now a lot more relevant today? Like Gavin mentioned, it's about being proactive. It's about going out there. Don't wait for customers or prospects to come to you. Go find those customers. What would you have to say about that?
I want to just give Gavin an A+ for that answer, because everything he said I agree with. I do want to give him a B on the t-shirt idea, because this should be a revenue share. We co-created that idea in the pre. No, I'm just kidding. I fully agree. Listen, sales has always been about creating value for someone with a need and accruing yourself as a salesperson a portion of that value. That's fundamentals. People have gotten away from the fundamentals. The industry has gotten away from the fundamentals. I believe this getting away from the fundamentals started with Aaron Ross's predictable revenue specialization into the SDR and AE categories. It was very useful. And people stayed very close to what he wrote in his book for the first 4 years after the book. And then it took on a life of its own. And I think SDRs and AEs got away from the basics, which is you are not responsible for activity. You're responsible for revenue. You are the last mile between the company and revenue. So I fully agree. Outbound has gotten a bad rap. Like I'm dating myself, but I've been an individual contributor or doing outbound or, doing something around sales for about 15 years. And then I was consulting with companies around scaling revenue, much of which involves scaling outbound, funnily enough, for another 2 or 3 years. And throughout that time, I've heard, oh, cold calling is dead. The phone's dead. No, the phone's dead. And, that was like, I don't know, 6 years, actually still going on. And then after that, I heard, no, LinkedIn in-mails are dead. No, they're dead. You can't use them anymore. Like, it's just the algorithm. So throughout that whole time, I've heard many iterations of outbound is dead. The latest one, get this, inbound's the new outbound. I'm like, great. That keeps people like me in business, because people who understand that sales is about creating value for a specific segment of the market will always win. Why? Because they are delivering a targeted message to a niche. And here's what a niche is. I say it on every webinar I'm on. A niche is a specific set of people in a specific circumstance with a specific desire for your transformation. If you've nailed that, outbound will work, because you're talking to that group of people about the transformation you provide. Then really, how cold is your call? You already know that niche really well. Conversely, if you're sending a broad message to the wider market, it's just noise.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Marc. Now let's, just for the context of everyone else as well, we've got this presentation deck going on the side. It's predominantly just going to give you an idea of the topics and themes that we're discussing. And it's also for people joining in at different stages of this conversation to know what we're actually going to be talking about. So this is more directional in that sense. So before we go in, I think just to give you all context, what are the stuff that we're going to be trying to cover here is predominantly we'll start off with outbound campaigns itself, right? How does one build something like an outbound campaign? 2 is how do you build effective cadences? Cadences are extremely important. So what is the right way to build the right kind of cadence in terms of emails, in terms of calls, LinkedIn messages, whatnot. And I'm sure there are multiple other channels we're not discussing there as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier on, it's no more about a spray and pray game. The game is about personalization. And like Mark mentions as well, if you know your audience, if you know the segment, if you know the employee size, you know the persona really well, there comes in your personalization, there comes in all of that. How effective is that? How effective is it to A/B test as well? So it's all of that. And then, of course, what are the tools one requires? And I'd like to expand a little bit more on the tools piece. One is, of course, tools that will enable your SDR or account executive or salesperson get better. But what about other tools we're not talking about? For example, should we look at ABM tools? Will that help? Are those signals important for outbound as well? If we know the kind of customers coming onto our website, if we know through some kind of basic marketing effort, will that help our outbounding team? Should we be talking about, because is that the new outbound? Something for us to think about, right? And then, of course, are there best practices that in your experiences that you've used, one for measuring, one for coaching, we'll talk about hiring as well. How do you pick up the right SDR? What's the right kind of profile for one to build their organization? Essentially that. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about in this session. And then, of course, Q&A. I can see people talking on the chat as well. Keep dropping in your questions. Feel free. We'll try to respond to them if we can during the session, but essentially we'll do all of that right at the end. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, let's start off with outbound campaigns themselves. So maybe we'll start off with just trying to define, how do you look at outbound campaigns in your own capacity within your firm? Where does it begin from? So we're talking about account book setting. What is an outbound campaign? Just for the larger audience, and how would you build? We'll start with you, Mark.
Absolutely. So just a caveat before I reply. I've sold in the SaaS world, so that's recurring revenue, but I've also sold in the high ticket sales world, which is a little different. Coaches, consultants, think your Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosis, Russell Brunson's of the world. They're selling an info product or a coaching course or something that's high ticket, I would say 6,000 or more. And that's typically not recurring revenue. It's paid in full. PIF is the term that's used in that industry, or it's a split pay. So it's split over 3 payments, or it could even be financed. So in the high ticket sales world, I think I remember I said the industry's gotten away with the AE SDR specialization from the basics of sales. What is sales? You're helping somebody and accruing a portion of the value you create. The high ticket sales world is very close to that model. It's because like the salespeople are actually mainly commission only sales reps. So they only get paid when the company receives money. So it's all about cash collected. And outbound campaigns, so in this world, instead of an SDR, you have a setter. And the setter, they're responsible for screening the prospect and getting them on the closer's calendar. The closer is the AE, and the closer is showing up to 6 to 8 meetings per day. That's on their calendar and just closing them out. So in this model, and this is a model I worked in for outbound, I had the most reps on outbound in this environment. I saw it work really well when obviously your niche is defined. So I'm going to use some common terms like your ICP. Let's call it your ICP. Your personas are defined. You know exactly who you're talking to. And the setter is really responsible for going out and hitting a list of these people. So let me be really clear about what I mean by your ICP is defined. Like in marketing, they also have this idea of personas, and they'll say, Mary, a marketing manager at a $35 million SaaS company, which is our sweet spot. She reads, I don't know, this marketing magazine, like a physical publication. She's in these LinkedIn groups, and she's interested about, like, is that real? Like, I don't know, like, the marketing person is tasked with coming out with a persona. They do some research to come up with this thing, but is that representative of the niche? No, I'm talking about, I'll give you an example. I was working at salesprocess.io. We did some research on our closed customers, and we were trying to find commonalities, and we came up with a very, very specific persona. It was a 28 to 35-year-old male, never female, who had attended an Ivy League university in a quantitative discipline such as economics or mathematics or physics, who was on his second company. He had already exited one company, and who had a co-founder. How specific is that? That's pretty specific, right? Can you target that guy? Yeah, all you need is Sales Navigator. You can find that guy. You start with the school, and then You know, like that's really, really specific. You can be really confident that when you find a person like that, that you can craft a message to that person that's really, really specific. So I think I rambled there. Hope I answered the question, but the separation between setter and closer, or SDR and AE, and the targeting, to me, work hand in hand. And these are the foundations of a great outbound campaign.
How about you, Gavin?
Yeah, and I think Mark brought up some really good points there, specifically talking about ICP. Look, the most important thing when crafting an outbound campaign is to first identify that ICP. And actually, I think there's a lot of cross functionality that needs to happen with, you know, marketing and any other basic customer facing function within an organization. One thing that I like to take things down to is this concept of what I call ROE, or rules of engagement. Every organization does it a little bit differently. Maybe it's territory-based selling, or it's role-based selling, or it's revenue-based selling, all right? So when we think about the campaigns that we're putting together, a really effective strategy when starting to scale this up is break things down by this idea of rules of engagement, all right? So for instance, at Uscreen, we do things with a BDR team that does do things inbound, an SDR team that is fully outbound, AE, AE2, and each one of them have different sorts of rules of engagement, okay? So when we think about the campaigns that we're building out there, we are assigning a set of parameters that each different segment can go and approach, all right? Because the language that you target based off of those rules of engagement can really, really change from campaign to campaign, okay? Anybody who's ever been an individual contributor in IC knows that your skill set gets better the longer you are in that role. So an SDR shouldn't necessarily have the same sort of apples to apples chops as a more tenured AE, right? So the campaigns need to be tailored to that. Now, we're not doing spray and pray here. We're getting targeted to different ICPs based off of a set of rules. Those rules, again, they could be based off of territory, all right? So, you know, Mark's an AE1 and he's handling, you know, everything of the East Coast of the United States. Sandeep is an SDR2 in this situation, and his territory could be, the MEAA, all right? Like, all of these different things help define this concept of rules of engagement. And once you've segmented those out, then we can build the campaigns around there, all right? Because the people that Mark is speaking to are going to have a different set of needs, wants, and questions that need to be answered than who Sandeep is targeting in this situation. So the first step to rolling out outbound is know that ICP and then figure out how that breaks down throughout your organization. And then from there, we get into the fun stuff. We get into the content. And I don't know if there's any marketers on this call, and I try to give marketers all the love as possible because I'm terrible when it comes to content. However, I do know how to measure what works.
Marketers, we do love you. Like, don't get this wrong. We do love you.
Oh, I love marketers. And you know, sometimes there's that love-hate relationship, but that's the perpetual battle between sales and marketing. But then after we break down those segments, that's when we get into content. Content is the thing that everybody loves, and that's where things get a lot more fun, and more fun for the individual contributors too. And especially when you can got a couple different hands guiding what sort of content we're setting out there during our outbound reaches, man. That's when we start to unleash the beast, as we like to say.
Awesome. Thanks. Oh, by the way, by confession, I am a marketer as well. I'm a marketer at Outplay, so it's good to know we've got that alignment going. But of course, my prior experience, I started my journey in sales, moved into marketing, and SDR is part of my org as well. But I think, like you mentioned, Gavin, marketing's role is got to come in and put out that right kind of content that's really going to help drive those campaigns into the ICPs, and I think that makes a lot more sense. Awesome.
That's why we say outbound is a team effort. All right, it's not, I might be jumping ahead here. It's not just sales involved in outbound. You know, demand gen, marketing, all of these different customer-facing touch points are all part of the larger, I guess, enigma of outbound. So if we think about it, outbound should be pretty straightforward, but you got to remember within your organization, a lot of different cross functions have to touch it.
And that's a point I want to cover, especially in the tools part as well, because I want to see how outbound is no more the way outbound used to be. It's already amalgamated into something. Or is there a future of outbound? And we'll talk about that in the tools. And I do believe there's a bigger role for marketing also to play with outbound in a larger sense. And we'll talk about that as we move along. But let's start with one of the
one quick thing I would add to what Gavin said is like a little bit of devil's advocate. It is a team effort. I want to emphasize, though, that the responsibility of the individual salesperson, because that's what you are as an SDR or an AE. You're a salesperson. If you're an SDR, you're responsible for revenue, not just for putting meetings on your AE's calendar, right? The number one trait of a successful salesperson I've observed over 22 years and studies in like psychology and neurolinguistic programming is it persuasion? No, it's actually empathy, which is the ability to put yourself in the mind of another person. And if you have that quality, you can naturally understand what your ICP, what your niche cares about, what they need, and craft a message yourself as if you have the problem. So I just want to say, yes, it's a team effort. Marketing does have to help come up with a message, but let's not shirk the obligation of the individual salesperson to fully inhabit the world of the prospect in order to be able to craft an effective outbound message.
Spot on. That's exactly, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of just moving a little bit ahead, what's the right, cadence has become very important in all of this, right? We're not just sending out that one email, we're not making this just one call. First, before we get into cadences as well, today we're talking about, we know the obvious challenge, the channels that we have. Today we have email, today we have LinkedIn, today we have phone call. Are these the only channels today, or are we seeing SDRs and AEs using other channels as well? If they are, would love to hear. I think it would be great for some of the audience members as well. Are there channels that we're not talking about openly? Would be great here. And then, of course, keeping all of those channels in mind, how do you build that right cadence? Where do you start building that cadence from? Is there places you pick up the cadence from, or who decides the cadence? Who owns the cadence? Is it down to the individual? Is it a management thing? Is it somebody else running the cadence? Where do they pick up that from? So almost a two-part question. First of all, channels. Second, I will start with Gavin this time. So, and then what's the channels? And then, of course, how do you build that cadence? Where does it start from?
Yeah. So the traditional channels: email, phone call, social selling. So that could be on LinkedIn or depending on your market. I'll tell you, there are really great avenues to be targeting other social media platforms. Twitter, Instagram, really, really great to help drive the needle, because a lot of business is being done on those platforms as well. The one I really want to talk about, the one that I think is the biggest impact, or the one that's had the biggest impact on outbound, especially probably the last 5 years, definitely within the last 2 or 3, is video. Tools like Vidyard, have changed the game of elevating that value. Okay. So how many times have we heard cold calling's dead because nobody picks up the phone, nobody answers a number that they don't recognize, nobody listens to voicemails that are left? All right. Then it became about texting. Yeah, texting doesn't work because everybody gets too many text messages all the time and they just, gloss them over or delete them. Emails don't work. I only check my email, once a day, 4-hour work week. Thank you, Tim Ferriss. I can't, get above the fray there. All right, look, all of those things are always going to happen. We're always going to be really, really bombarded with it. I'll tell you the one that I really, really aligned myself to, and then I've made it a part of almost every single cadence that my outbound team sends out there, is personalized video messaging. It's taking the ease and delivery of email or texting with the personalization of a phone call or voicemail. All right. First of all, just so everybody knows, if you aren't aware of this, probably 90% of all emails are read on this thing right here. Okay. So you put a whole lot of text in there and it just becomes something for your eyes to glaze over. All right. Putting in a short 30-second video where somebody can have a personalized message and give them the opportunity to talk about the value that they want to bring, That's where we're starting to get some game-changing stuff. And you can templatize this in a cadence. Let me explain that a little bit. So using tools, Sandeep, free plug, using an awesome tool like Outplay, okay? And you build out the sequences that they have there, you can make Vidyard as a curated step, all right? So you can write out all the copy, you can measure that through stuff like A/B testing, and then you can also play around with having one of those steps not be a phone call or a social point or an email, but make them create a 30-second video, all right? This is actually something I do in the interview process whenever I hire new reps. I ask them towards the end, I want you, here's this tool Vidyard, I want you to make me a 30-second elevator pitch explaining Uscreen as if you were, speaking to a potential prospect, all right? That is key because I know it's one of the biggest drivers of moving the needle when it comes to sequences. I also see increase in open rates in Outplay every time I include video. I also know that that is the email that gets opened the most in 90% plus of my cadences, all right? So if you guys are not looking into tools like video, do yourself a favor. A lot of free tools out there, play around with them. They can really work wonders.
Awesome. Gavin, also, how does one build a sequence? What's the origin point?
Oh, totally ignored your second question. My apologies on that. How does one build a sequence? Now, going back to my previous point about ROE, I generally put parameters based off of the individuals that are doing the outbound. I'm the first to say for especially more junior level SDR, especially SDR1, that is stuff that's usually pre-crafted for them with the ability to add personalization. Why? Because this is a blocking and tackling exercise. It's getting comfortable with the idea of outbounding, and every level up from there, I give more leeway, so to speak. So with like an AE2, I allow them to create their entire sequence all the way through because they've earned that right. They've got the chops out there. They know what works. And going back to what Mark has said a couple of times, it's all about show me the money at that point, all right? You're up here, you're a higher level rep. You need to be able to deliver the revenue. I know you're gonna outbound and I trust that you've got the means to do it, all right? So scaling that up appropriately, giving people the right tools, and then also partnering with marketing or enablement, if any organizations have dedicated enablement specialists, to get a constant flow of material to keep cadences relevant and effective. And I use that term relevant because I think that's actually a way more important aspect than personalization, right? It's important to personalize messaging. I get personalized messages from salespeople all the time. If it's not relevant information to me or my business, I have no reason to check it out. So I also challenge people to make sure your cadences, your touch points are more so relevant and less so personalized when push comes to shove.
Awesome. Thanks.
I went a couple of different ways there. I hope I answered your question though.
Yeah, I think what you were saying is you're of course building, in terms of sequences, one of the things you mentioned was the fact that depending on which stage of the journey the SDR or AE is, for probably a junior SDR, you're starting them off, you're building that sequence out for them, making it, and as the person gets a little more experience, you're giving them that leeway to create their own, would I say create their own sequences, or would I say create their own personalizations and email? What are you talking about? Is that more a sequence level?
I do mean at that point, yeah, create your own sequences for like an AE2. I give that sort of autonomy out there. Go ahead and create it, A/B test it yourself. For an AE1, you've got the ability to put it out there, but I want eyes on it. I want to make sure that we can affect change. So I'll have, one of my managers make that sort of change for them, right? But they do have more leeway when it comes to content. And then when we get down to like SDRs, that is usually solely crafted by, it's usually kind of a team effort of marketing and SDR leadership.
Got it.
And then I usually try to add my little 2 cents too, but people don't always listen to me.
Awesome, thanks. Mark, now over to you, Mark. Now, one is of course the channels piece. Apart from what Gavin has mentioned, is there any specific channel you think we're not talking about, or one of the channels that's really working well, or you've seen it work well?
Gavin just covered that topic massively, so not sure how much I can add, but I will say that I do, I guess, have some experience in the high ticket sales world, like I mentioned, which is not as well known, not as much talked about in the traditional SaaS world. One channel, so I'll preface this by saying the channels that you use to reach your prospect in the niche will vary depending on your price point, your product, and the nature of the problem you're solving. Well, so actually the product changes based on the nature of the problem you're solving. So for example, in the high ticket sales world, there's biz offers, like B2B offers. So I am a digital agency, like a Facebook ads agency. I'm at 20K a month. I'm stressed out. I want to get to 100K a month, but I don't want to add a bunch of people and add a bunch of hours to my schedule. And there's programs that, hey, we got you covered. We've done this for so many years. You pay $8,000, you go through our course, and with the course in the community, we'll take you to that promised land, right? So that is a very different offer than a fitness offer where Buddy is a very successful coach for men over 40 who, got the dad bod, hey, guilty as charged, and want to, feel sexy again for their wife, but they want to do it in 3 months. That's a, very specific niche, but a very different offer, very different needs, and therefore very different product created for these two things. So for that second offer I mentioned, a fitness offer, a wellness offer like diet or something like that, or relationships, your marriage is fizzling out. How do you get it back on track? Dating coaches, channels that work, a channel that works really, really well that I was really surprised about. So full disclosure, I went on as an individual contributor on one or two of these offers a couple months ago, just to see how it worked. So I was doing the outbound, and Instagram is surprisingly really, like, people read their DMs. I mean, and people, you can learn a lot about people just from the visual narrative of Instagram. So you can kind of learn what they're about, that both the person, and if there's a brand that you're selling to on Instagram, similarly, you can gather a lot of information that way. And there is somebody monitoring the DM. So I was really surprised about that. From the tools perspective, I don't really know of a lot of tools that have mastered integrating, like LinkedIn is now kind of integrated into Cadence. Everybody knows you got to have LinkedIn in there, but Twitter and Instagram, no, not so much. And even Facebook, like Messenger, there's platforms that will, hey, you can have your emails, your calls, and maybe your Messenger. And so for example, HubSpot Conversation Hub covers a lot of these social channels, but Instagram is a really effective channel that I've not seen a tool that your reps can depend on. So it tends to be very ad hoc. It tends to be very, the dreaded word, spreadsheets. Like, people are keeping track of that channel on spreadsheets. So anyway, I find that interesting. In terms of B2B, here's a bombshell. Everybody ready? The phone. What? Mark, you call people outbound? Yeah, and I make money doing it. Guess what? So cold calling is dead. I love hearing that. Bring it more, because that's more opportunity for me. If you know how to do it well, if you know what sales is about, you understand that calling somebody, and I love how you said this, Gavin, it's not just got to be personalized, the message, it's got to be relevant. I took Basho sales training, which is given by MJ Hoffman. I highly recommend for folks doing outbound. This was taught at Salesforce, was taught at Gartner, two places I work. So it works really, really well in the enterprise because it gets everybody on the same page. And the key thing about Basho, I won't go into the whole methodology, but their headline is why me, why now? And your initial outreach has to answer that question in about 6 seconds, because people think, oh, you have 90, some people say 30, some people say 60, you have 60 seconds. No, bro, you have 6 seconds. I used to dial for dollars at a gym in New York, getting people to renew their, this is New Yorkers, right? And New Jerseyers, get them to renew their memberships, bro. It's like, get the fuck out of here. What you got for me? Like, if you don't tell them something interesting, something relevant, Gavin, in 6 seconds, you're off the phone, right? So Basho just boils down and says, hey, that's how sales actually is. The person has to understand, this is for me, and this is for me now, right? So, wow, I forgot why I was going there, but yeah, so picking up the phone is a channel I've seen work really well for B2B.
The most powerful channel, yeah. In terms of cadences,
yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one more thing. The person who's afraid to pick up the phone is the person who's going to be looking for a new job. Like, Just put it out there. Like the phone
Facts.
it's the gold standard. Okay, it will have ebbs and flows. Sometimes you'll get more connects than others. But when in doubt, if there's one skill you want to teach your team to master, it is the art of the cold call.
Call reluctance equal unemployment.
Absolutely, spot on. I think every outbound sales rep will probably vouch for that, and that's the only way you can truly be successful in outbound. Is you need to pick up the phone, make those calls, and really get good at doing that. Because eventually you will. The other point, Mark, is also, of course, in terms of cadences, right? How does one build a cadence? Does it start from, where does it start from?
So I really liked Gavin's answer. See, I've never been a VP sales and managed a team with varying gradations of like, okay, you have like the levels, SDR1, SDR2. So I really like that answer. I don't have that perspective. The perspective I have, again, going back to my time, like, 2 years in the high ticket sales world. And what I see, I'm kind of still in that world, and I still see this working. So let me preface this by using some definitions. A startup is a temporary organization in search of a profitable unit case. So you are trying to get to product market fit as a startup. Some people call like Freshdesk a startup. Freshdesk is not a startup. Freshdesk is a business, right? It was a startup and they kept the label, but they're not anymore, right? So a business is a more permanent organization in charge of scaling the unit economic case, right? So yeah, I lost my train of thought. Just remind me of the question again.
So the question is, how do you build cadences? Like, so you were, of course, giving a different perspective as opposed to Gavin's team. Yeah.
Got it. Not enough coffee. So I did that preface to say that as a startup, you are trying to you're basically doing a lot of experiments. So I love the in your deck, you're mentioning A/B testing. You're doing a lot of experiments to find the message that works best to the niche. And I've seen that works best with the best seller kind of copying what they do. So that could be the founder, or he's got he's done some things that work and now he's passing it off to his team. And the top guy, it's usually you watch the results and you look at the leaderboard, and that top person, at some point you just go, hey, everybody do what he's doing, because that's working. So he's hitting them first on Instagram, then he's going over here to LinkedIn. He's like, I sent you a message on Instagram. His messaging is clearly working. It's resonating. His conversion rates are, or his or her conversion rates are twice the average. So, hey, let's just do what's working. So I've seen that work. And other than that, I like Gavin's perspective, which is that, it depends on the sales rep's maturity. So the more maturity and the more dues you've paid, the more reps you've put in, the more you can be trusted, because you've shown, look, you can execute the basic blocking and tackling, but wow, you also got creative. You said 100 of the template, but then you also on your own sent 10 really super personalized, hyper personalized messages, and you were getting results from both. So you're using your head. You're not just, here's a script, I am an outbound monkey, right? Like, you've shown that you can use your brain as well as your hands.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Now, I think the next one, we've kind of covered that. I'm going to skip this one a little bit because we did speak a bit about this as well while we're talking about cadence. I think one very powerful point Gavin mentioned as well, it's not just about personalization, it's not always about A/B testing, but the message got to be relevant. If it's not relevant, nobody's going to even look at your email or even bother about what you're sending. So bring a strong point of relevancy into the kind of email that you're doing, or even the cold call pitch that you're making. Make a lot more sense to the person you're talking to. And you mentioned a point as well, Mark, about empathy being a very strong point there, right? So traditionally, everyone says, step into the customer's shoes, step into the other person's, know what their core pain points are, and then your message will be crafted a lot better, your pitch will be a lot better as well. So I'll skip this particular piece because we did cover a little bit of that. Let's go into the tools part now. This is going to be important, right? So one is that it's kind of a two-part question. One is, of course, we'll start with the first one. We'll go to you, Mark, first. What are the essential tools you believe any sales SDR team needs to have? Of course, we'll skip the basics. We'll skip CRM. We know everyone needs some kind of a CRM to get things going, to keep the house in order. What else do they need?
You definitely need Cadence. So that's Outplay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe Outplay.
It's an engagement platform. For sure.
It's an engagement platform. There's others as well. For example, the firm I work with is HubSpot Focus. HubSpot has their own Cadence tool built in. So you definitely need Cadence. And depending on if the phone is a large part of your business, you need conversational intelligence. One of the biggest downfalls, both in the SaaS world and the high ticket sales world, that I see is not recording calls. Calls are a gold mine of information. Each touch point, there's the environment data stream, which is you want to start a company and you don't have any data points. So you look at Gartner and you talk to, you Google stuff. That's the environment data stream. The customer data stream is when you one-on-one talk to people with the problem. Every call your SDR makes is a touch point. That's gold. That's actually like IP, it's intellectual property. And I find that a lot of companies are not recording their calls, right? So you definitely need a conversational intelligence platform. Just for those who may not be familiar with this, that's like your Gong, your Chorus. I'm sure there's some other options in there. There's Fathom as well. What else? Yeah, I think that's really your cockpit. If you're an SDR, if you're a setter, you're in your CRM. Some CRMs have sequences built in, or they have a tool like Outplay. And they sit in that tool, and then conversation intelligence. These are the two that immediately hit me top of mind.
Thanks, Mark. Gavin, outside of that, is there anything else we're missing here?
I mean, those are definitely the most important. The CRM to the Cadence to the conversation intelligence. There are opportunities where you can, maybe consolidate a couple of those. There's a couple of tools that do several of those things in one. If we're talking kind of larger stack, if we think of Outbound as a team effort, we need some sort of ABM engine as well. So we do need to measure the effectiveness of marketing. Again, content is king, right? The best way to get our messaging out there is to make sure that we are being relevant. The best way to be relevant is to have updated and recent content. The best way to make sure we know that that content is being looked at and being used effectively is meaningful marketing engagement. All right. So a lot of great tools out there. I've been using Pardot for the longest time with that, but all of those things together, help create, I guess, that overall look of, what does success look like? Awesome. And to double down on Mark's point of conversation intelligence, so crucial, okay? Especially, and I don't know about anybody else's organization. I work in a remote-only company. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. My CEO is based out of Washington, D.C. I have sales reps in Latin America. I have them in Western and Eastern Europe. I have one in Hawaii. Everybody is all across the board. I cannot be there listening to their calls in person. So without tools like Gong, for instance, then when it comes to training and development, which is I know another topic we're going to hit on here shortly, then it all completely falls by the wayside. If you can't listen and pinpoint and make your SDRs, your AEs be better with outbounding, then you're just going to be shooting in the dark.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for that, Gavin, as well. So I just reiterate: CRM, of course, sales engagement platform, conversational intelligence, your most important tools to have to get these things going. And of course, if you're using conversational intelligence, make sure that you're recording your calls. Otherwise, there's no point in having something like that. The whole purpose of that is essentially that. So invest in tools like these that can help drive better performance. And of course, the other pieces, right? So if you are a firm that's looking at ABM as being your strategy, have a tool that's going to help them, because a lot of that can fuel all of the stuff coming into outbound as well. So effectiveness of that. So if you're looking at essentially augmented tools like there are a bunch of ABM tools today. That's the Terminus, for example, one of them that exists, 6 Sense, and all of them exist in the market today, can be used to sort of drive engagement as well. So think about that if you have a larger piece in mind. Okay, just a couple more questions before we go into the Q&A. I know we've got a bunch of questions coming up as well for the Q&A section. So as I mentioned earlier on, if you have questions for us, there's a Q&A option or the chat option. Just keep dropping those questions. We'll try and respond to them right at the end of this session. We'll just take two more questions now. One is, of course, we'll start with you, Gavin. You did talk a little bit about that earlier on as well. What are the best practices in terms of coaching? Of course, like you mentioned, if you have a good conversational intelligence tool, you already got that calling feedback going on there with the team. What are the best kind of ways one can coach the team to get them better, doing stuff better? Two is, of course, what are the best practices for measurement? Of course, for an SDR or a salesperson, there are several metrics one can measure with calls made, emails sent, and all that. What are the 2-3 key things that they should be looking at? We'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to unpack this. So let me just kind of start small. I'll continue on the idea of the importance of conversation intelligence, and then we can talk a little bit about coaching cadences and things like that. Why do I love listening to calls so much? Nobody can hide from a call, okay? There's no ambiguity on there. We are listening to the call in real time. I know what is being said. I know how questions are being asked, phrased, and answered, all right? The best way to train people up, it's just like, insert any sports metaphor here, watching tape only makes you better. Listening to calls only makes you better, all right? I still take time with my reps, and during one-on-one sessions, I will listen to calls with them all the way through. Now, a lot of people are like, I'm way too busy. I don't have time to listen to a 30-minute long disco call. I don't have time to listen to my SDR struggle through, 45 cold calls out there, and I have to try to find the one that worked. Okay, so one thing that I do is I try to empower the individual in this case, all right? So something I do every week with every single person on my team, I ask them to pick one call, okay? It could be a cold call, it could be a disco call, it could be a full-on technical demo, it can be a follow-up, it can be a closing call, okay? All of our calls are recorded, and for this reason. You pick one call, you get with your manager, and you are going to listen to that call together. But your manager is not going to sit there and just listen to this thing for an hour and then, okay, all right, pause it right there. Let's talk to this. No, I ask that every rep listen to the call all the way through, and then they make notes on where they could be better or where they know that they did really well, okay? If you're going to use stuff like conversation intelligence, understand like the true capacities. Timestamp calls really can drive the needle super forward, okay? So when that situation now arises, that one-to-one, that rep has already listened to the call all the way through. They have time-stamped the areas that they think that they need coaching. Prior to this call too, said manager has found the time to listen to this call, and then they have their timestamps, all right? So you're not spending your one-on-one listening to an hour-long call. You are listening to 3 or 4 key points where we know coaching can be had. That is one of the greatest sales training tools I've ever come across, because you can't hide from it. And the more reps start listening to themselves of how they can be better, the quicker they're going to get rid of bad habits. So that's kind of number one. Number two is this idea of make sure coaching is part of your cadence. Okay, so if we are leading a sales organization or anybody that's outbound focused, have a coaching plan. A coaching plan is not sit there of like, hey, Mark, you're 80% of your target. Where's the other 20% before the month's over? It's almost the end of the quarter. That's not coaching. That is just, spitting information. A coaching cadence is having agreed upon goals that are driven by KPIs. So for example, start of every quarter, I put together an actual individual coaching cadence for every single rep, and that's specialized to the rep. It could be SDR1 is going to increase sit rate by 5% quarter over quarter. All right, how are we going to do that? Then it's broken down month over month. What are our training topics for that month? Week over week. What are the things that we are going to be looking for in calls and emails that we know drive that 5% increase to increasing sit rate? AE1, all right, their goal is going to be increase new net MRR 10% month over month, all right? What does that look like, all right? It is up to us as sales leaders to dictate what that coaching cadence looks like. If anybody has questions about this, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm happy to even provide some templates. Something that I'm really very passionate about when it comes to scaling reps is getting them coached and trained properly, because it's the best way to scale. It's not enough just to talk about KPIs. Have plans to move the needle and use these awesome tools so that you can uncover more, all right? So if you don't know where to start from a coaching cadence, listen to a whole lot of calls, see where the weakness is, and then do the math, all right? If we were able to fix this problem, what does that mean to the bottom line? Does that increase conversion by, X%? Does that increase revenue by X%? Okay, now let's work backwards. We know what the goal is. Now, what are the key things that we have to work on? And how do I break that down monthly, weekly, even daily?
Spot on, Gavin. Awesome. Brilliant.
Hey, man, are you in my brain, Gavin? I actually look at it through a RevOps lens. RevOps is sales ops plus marketing ops plus all the other ops. This is sales ops. I find that measuring reps and coaching them, why are you measuring them? Because you want to manage what you measure, right? I find that coaching is often a bolt-on. So your hair's on fire, you hire the reps, you staff up, you're selling. Great. Can you sell better? Probably. How are you going to do that? Don't know. Didn't think about the hiring plan to get the sales enablement guy. Didn't think about coaching. Just we're a big happy family, right? We're creating RevOps is about increasing revenue and increasing the rate of growth of revenue. So it's like first derivative, second derivative. You're increasing revenue month over month, but you're also increasing the rate of growth of revenue. And how do you do that? You have to make your people better. So obviously part of that is the bad, and I'm sure you'll get to this, Gavin, the unpleasant part where you have to offboard people. So, there's a bar and some people don't make the bar, but then those who are above the bar, and there's always a saying, don't focus on your A+ reps, you focus on your A reps, not your B+, not your B+, not your B-. You focus on your A reps because they can become A+. You want to have a coaching plan to get them to that level. And I've seen that not really focus on in organizations. It's not really, so kudos, Gavin, that this is a passion of yours. I would highly encourage people to reach out to him about, how do I up level my reps? One thing I would say is that, product doesn't always matter, but in this case it does. So conversational intelligence is actually really important here because Gong and Chorus are two platforms I know of, and they're pretty much at feature parity, I think, last I looked. But they help whittle down the time for the manager to do this. Like they have AI that will pull out sentiment. They'll pull out the words most used on calls that close one. They'll look at CRM, what was close one, find the commonality. So the manager doesn't have to spend all that time listening to the call. So, maybe lighter tools don't have that. And you're actually going to shoot yourself in the foot if you try to save a little money, get the platform without those features. So that's just something to think about.
Thanks, guys. So I think we've got a few more minutes before we close. So I had a question around hiring, but I think what I'll do is let's go to the audience. I think it'll be a good chance to sort of have a look at what questions we've gotten on the chat. 1 second, I'll just stop sharing my screen. I can see a lot of things coming. Hold on. Whoa. Just give me a sec.
Sandeep, I found the Q&A here. So
oh yeah, please, if you can help me there. Yeah, I was trying to figure out where.
The first one is, what's outbound function significance in PLG model?
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to take that a little bit further. All right, so if we think of PLG, product-led growth, is this idea that we will grow as a revenue organization really by the strength of the products. And one of the things that I always say, and coming from a PLG organization, is product is one of the things that the end user always expects to be good, okay? So it's really a team effort with product and sales to get people converted onto the platform. Now I'll use Uscreen in more of an explicit sense here. So the way that I view outbound when it comes to PLG is really twofold. One, I hit on a little bit earlier, identify the ICP The product has done a really good job of understanding who that ideal candidate or ideal customer profile is. And then also this idea of PQL, all right? PQL is product qualified leads. Sales and marketers know this idea of MQL, SAL, SQL, SQL. There's so many different acronyms that we use as salespeople, but one that we should be thinking about in the context of PLG is PQL, so a product qualified lead. Now from there, that's helped shape out the ICP, and we can create an outbound strategy, a lot of which we laid out earlier in the call. You know, develop it, create those ROEs, go find the people that are the good fit for the product. The second half of that is this land and expand methodology. All right, if you've got a product that a lot of people are clamoring to use and you have a lot of user engagement, there is outbound efforts that can be made to get people to increase their engagement with you. I'm going to use Calendly as kind of like the gold standard. Everybody here probably is familiar with Calendly. They offered out a free product. They still do offer out a free product. The idea of people getting so comfortable with it, and they measure engagement from product, finding those PQLs, and then that's how they help shift some of their outbound strategy. We see who is using this product, and we see how they can use it more, okay? It's great to have a whole lot of users, but ask anybody who's really scaling revenue, high ticket items, especially in the SaaS world, really will move the needle a lot quicker. So you can use the PLG strategy and actually find more higher ticket, or what I like to call high touch revenue. So if you put things in two different buckets, everything coming in being attracted by the product is kind of low touch. It's self-serve. You know, maybe they have a question for a support specialist or something like that, but it's kind of following into low touch. Everything that's outbound is high touch, right? This is where we're trying to get the higher engagement out there. Oftentimes these two things will overlap. So I know it was a little convoluted, but to recap, find that ICP, reach out to people that you know are going to be good fits for the product. And for those people that are already in the product ecosystem, identify them as a PQL, and there's going to be opportunities to expand engagement. So you've already landed them, then have your outbound team reach out to them just like they were cold calling anybody else and get them to engage further, expand it.
Awesome. It's a very interesting question that came up now, I think, and we didn't cover this. It's a good thing to talk about as well. Have any of you all used a gifting platform, for example, as kind of one of the channels? Personally, I've used gifting probably later down the funnel, but as a conversational opener, or have any of you in your previous, I'll go to Mark this time. So you work with different, outside of the SaaS world, with these large tech companies, you're trying to work with enterprise deals and stuff like that. Has gifting ever been a good way of breaking into a conversation, or where do you see the value of something like that?
No, we don't use it. and here's why. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, it's very close to the metal. It's very close to old school sales. Think of like the traveling salesman in the 1800s with the top hat, who's got the liniments and the remedies, and he's got to make a living by selling his stash, right? That's pure sales. So high ticket sales is very close to that. And the mental frame of the setter and the closer when sales is successful in that environment is that they're the price. They're the expert. They have the reps. They have the solution to the problem of the niche. All they're trying to do is qualify. Are you in the niche? That's all they're trying to qualify. You're in the niche if you have the problem, you have the timeline, like you need to solve it right now, and you have the budget to do so. So they are almost trying to qualify people out. So they're not sending people gifts to thank them for getting on a call. That would break the whole psychological frame. The setter or the closer is the price, and they're opening the door to this promised land to those who are willing to take the first step. So it's a psychological clash between gifting but that's the high ticket world. I don't know about you, Gavin. I'm sure it can work well. I agree with you. Later in the funnel, in the traditional SaaS world, is when I would typically do it. But Gavin.
Yeah, I've done gifting in kind of a more hacked together methodologies. The one thing I really like, especially kind of a down funnel, is, hey, we've got this big closing call coming up. Text them over, a gift card, Starbucks, or order pizza for their office or something like that, and be like, hey, excited to embark on this relationship. We're meeting today at 11 a.m. Coffee's on me. But it helps be, what I say, shockingly refreshing. But I don't have that much experience dealing with a lot of gifting.
So, since we're on this topic, I will tell you about one incident where gifting worked on me, but it was not to open the conversation. The Slintel, I really liked the product. I called, I had a client, I wanted to get pricing. The sales guy dealt with it. His name is Marshall. I'm going to call him out. Marshall over at Slintel, just Marshall Praveen. Such a beautiful guy and really empathic. He really tried to understand how he could help. And he was willing to even put me onto another platform if it wasn't a fit. He just wanted to understand my needs. I was so impressed. I started recommending Slintel in a big sales forum that I'm a part of. And a month later or 3 weeks later, a gift shows up. I think it was, he bought me breakfast unannounced. He says, Mark, somebody's going to knock on your door. And it cemented the relationship. I am now a Slintel champion for life because of that experience. It really, I would have recommended the product anyway, but it really worked to show that, I don't know, it was impactful. It was really impactful, but not in the context necessarily that you spoke of.
I think also for me as well, I think gifting, you got to look at it as a larger piece. It just can't be the only standalone piece in the entire, whatever you're trying to do, right? So I think again, this is from personal experience, I feel it really works well. Anyways, I think we're just out of time. We in fact crossed a minute as well. So before we go, any parting words? I know we had so much of fun. I didn't even realize the time. I was like, oh God, we're just moving so far away. Mark, we'll start with you, Mark. Any last words, any big takeaways for the folks joining us, whoever is there? I'm sure this is being recorded as well, so people will watch this at their own convenience. Any parting words from you, Mark, and then we'll finish off with you, Gavin, and we'll say goodbye to everyone.
Quick parting words. If you want more, sell more. To sell more, use outbound. And when you use outbound, be empathic. Use your head, use your heart.
Awesome. Gavin, you got to come up with something different now. I know you're going to say that.
I stole Gavin's actually. I stole Gavin's.
It's all good. No, we can co-own it. But I'm just going to double down on that. Be empathetic. To sell is human. All right. Get out there, enjoy it. And that's kind of the big thing that I always stress to people on my team. Got to enjoy it. The only way to embrace outbound is to have fun with it. So, have fun with it and make it work.
Have fun of it, make it work. If you want more, sell more. Some big takeaways from all of you, and definitely cold calling is not dead. It's very much on. You just gotta that's your biggest skill in your outbounding. Try and get better at it. Try and make those small changes. That's what will take you further. Emailing, LinkedIn, all of that will still remain, but that's your most powerful weapon. So just sharpen that up and become a champ at that. But thanks all of you for joining us. We can see there's some 50, 60 messages on the chat going on. Of course, people were talking to each other. We've got a bunch of questions as well. Of course, you can reach out to all of us. We're all on LinkedIn. Very easy to find all of us. Feel free to DM your questions. Anything that we didn't cover here today, we're happy to cover that as well. And a big thank you to RevGenius for hosting this, and Christina as well for putting this all together.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Big awesome. Thanks to Shobit as well at the background, who's somewhere there. But thank you, Christina and RevGenius. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.